On a hot Thursday afternoon, July 6, 1944, thousands of people walked toward a field on Barber Street in Hartford, Connecticut, looking for relief from war news, rationing, work, and summer heat. The Ringling Bros and Barnum and Bailey Circus had come to town. For children, it promised animals, clowns, acrobats, music, and a world bigger than the home front. For parents, it was a few hours when ordinary fear might be left outside the tent. By the end of the matinee, the Big Top would become one of the deadliest fire disasters in American history. The crowd is usually estimated at between 6,000 and 8,000 people. They sat under a canvas tent roughly 500 feet long, watching a performance designed to make danger look controlled. Above them were trapeze artists and rigging. Around them were animal cages, tiered seats, canvas walls, narrow passageways, and exits that had to move a mass of spectators quickly if anything went wrong. What made that canvas more dangerous was the way circus tents were waterproofed. Accounts describe a mixture using paraffin wax and gasoline, a treatment that shed rain but could feed flame with terrifying speed. The fire began during the afternoon performance. The precise cause has never been settled. Some witnesses later spoke of a small flame near the southwest side of the tent. Others remembered smoke first, then a line of fire moving upward. What matters for the disaster is not just where the first spark came from, but what it touched. Once flame reached the treated canvas, the tent itself became fuel. Fire climbed, spread, and ran across the roof faster than a crowd could understand that the show had changed into an emergency. At first there was confusion because circus audiences were used to spectacle. A shout, a movement, even a sudden interruption could seem like part of a performance. Then burning strips of canvas began to fall. The air filled with smoke, heat, and animal panic. Musicians reportedly kept playing for a time, a choice remembered as an attempt to steady the crowd. But calm could not last under a roof that was burning above families. The essential problem became brutally simple. Thousands of people had to get out through limited openings while the shelter over them was failing. Crowd disasters are often explained afterward with a single word: panic, but that word hides more than it reveals. People searched for children, parents, seats, aisles, and exits in smoke and noise. Some moved toward the places they had entered. Some found exits blocked by equipment, chutes, or the pressure of other bodies. Ushers, circus workers, police, firefighters, and ordinary spectators tried to pull people through gaps, lift canvas, carry children, and create ways out. In those minutes, survival depended on distance, luck, visibility, and whether someone nearby could help. Outside, Hartford's emergency response became a citywide effort. Firefighters attacked the flames, but a burning Big Top could collapse into ash quickly. Police, soldiers, medical workers, taxi drivers, neighbors, and volunteers helped move the injured. Hospitals filled with burn victims and people suffering from smoke, crush injuries, and shock. The disaster unfolded during wartime, when many communities already practiced civil defense, but nothing about drills made the sight of injured children and families easier to bear. Hartford was forced to turn from entertainment to triage in a single afternoon. Death toll is commonly given as at least 167 people, with more than 700 injured. Many of the dead were children. Some victims could not be identified immediately because fire had made recognition impossible. One unidentified child, remembered for years as Little Miss 1565, became a symbol of the disaster's unresolved grief before later investigations connected her to a likely name. Numbers tell the scale, but they do not carry the whole burden. The fire tore through families, schools, neighborhoods, and a city's memory. Investigators and courts then faced the question that follows many disasters: who was responsible for danger that had been normalized before the day it killed? Circus officials were prosecuted, and the company eventually paid settlements, but accountability was broader than a courtroom. The Hartford fire exposed a system in which huge crowds could gather under flammable material, with exits and emergency planning that were not adequate for the speed of a tent fire. The disaster showed that spectacle, profit, tradition, and convenience had outrun safety. The safety lessons were concrete. Public assemblies needed better exit planning, less flammable materials, clearer emergency routes, and stricter inspection. A tent or hall is not safe because nothing bad happened yesterday. It is safe only if the design assumes that something could go wrong today. Hartford helped push fire codes, crowd control practices, and public awareness toward that principle. The Big Top was not just a place where a fire happened. It became evidence in the argument for prevention. One reason the disaster changed memory so deeply is that the circus had been designed to feel temporary. It arrived by rail, rose in a field, sold wonder for a day, and then moved on. Temporary structures can make risk seem temporary too, as if a canvas roof and wooden seats do not require the same seriousness as a theater, school, or factory. Hartford proved the opposite. A temporary crowd is still a crowd. A temporary wall can still block an exit. A temporary tent can still become a burning roof over thousands of people. The home front setting made that lesson sharper. In 1944, Americans were living with war casualties, bond drives, ration books, and constant reminders of shared duty. The The circus offered escape, but the response demanded the same civic mobilization that wartime communities understood. Ambulances, police, soldiers, nurses, volunteers, blood donors, and neighbors using whatever vehicles and strength they had. The tragedy became part of Hartford's war years, not separate from them. It showed that danger at home could arrive without an enemy bomber or battlefield. The legal aftermath could punish individuals, but reform had to change systems. Safer fabrics, fire retardant treatment, exit rules, aisle clearance, inspection authority, emergency planning, and staff training mattered because each one removed a small piece of the trap. None of those measures is dramatic. They do not look like heroism on a poster, but prevention often works by making sure the heroic rescue is never needed. That is the quiet legacy of disasters studied honestly. They turn grief into rules that future crowds may never notice because the rules succeed. That is why the story still matters when modern headlines warn about wildfires, fireworks restrictions, heat, dry weather, and crowded public events. The technology has changed, but the pattern is familiar. Risk accumulates in materials, exits, staffing, weather, rules, and assumptions. People often see the danger clearly only after a disaster proves it. Hartford asks a harder question: what should have been changed before July 6, 1944? The answer begins with humility. The people entering the circus were not foolish. They trusted an institution that looked ordinary and joyful. The workers were not expecting to become rescuers. The city was not expecting a mass casualty event in a field on a summer afternoon. Disasters often begin inside normal life, which is why prevention feels inconvenient until the moment it becomes everything. There is another lesson in the speed of the fire. Large disasters do not always give people time to deliberate. A family may have only seconds to decide whether to move left or right, whether to lift a child, whether to crawl, whether to trust the nearest opening. That is why safe design must make the correct action obvious before fear takes over. Clear exits, open aisles, trained staff, fire-resistant materials, and practiced response plans are not bureaucratic details. They are decisions made in advance on behalf of people who will not have time to make them later. Hartford also reminds us that memory has responsibilities. To remember only the horror is to freeze the victims inside the worst minutes of their lives. To remember only the reforms is to make the story too neat. A better memory holds both together: the ordinary joy of a circus afternoon, the failure that let fire move so fast, the courage of rescuers and strangers, the grief of families, and the practical duty to make the next gathering safer. History made clear means seeing the mechanism, not just feeling the tragedy. It also means asking whether today's ordinary venues, festivals, schools, arenas, and temporary stages have learned the lesson before smoke tests the plan. In memory, the Hartford Circus Fire is sometimes called the day the clowns cried. The phrase captures the shock of innocence and horror occupying the same place, but it should not turn the event into legend alone. It was a civic failure with names, materials, exits, decisions, victims, rescuers, and reforms. Its history is not only that a tent burned, it is that a city learned at unbearable cost that public safety has to be built before the crowd arrives.